The frost off Lake Ontario cut through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the banquet hall, sharp enough that I felt it through the silk of my dress, even as the room blazed with candlelight and applause. A whole side of Atlantic salmon sat untouched, in the center of the table when my husband stood, raised his glass of sparkling water, and turned it toward me like he was bestowing something. "To my wife," he said, his voice doing that warm, practiced thing it always did in front of people. "None of this happens without her. She's the most important person in my life." The table clapped. I lifted my glass, and my fingers wouldn't quite close around it properly. Not because I was moved. Because something in that applause sounded wrong, like nails going into wood that had already been measured and cut. The party was to celebrate Whitfield Logistics winning the Halifax port expansion contract. $420 million. The biggest deal in the company's history. My father built that company from a single delivery van in Scarborough. I'd been chairwoman since his funeral 18 months ago, his only child, the one who sat with the lawyers and signed where they told me to sign while everyone around me cried. Yet in that ballroom, you'd have thought my husband Desmond had built it himself. My mother-in-law, Constance, sat at the head in deep emerald, a string of pearls she liked to remind people had been her mother's. She raised her glass to her side of the table. "Am I wrong to say it?" she said, eyes bright with wine. When Desmond finally got his chance to step up, he was a natural. A company this size needs a steady hand at the helm. A man's hand. The words landed on my chest like something physical. Across the table, Desmond's younger brother Wesley, flushed from champagne, clapped him on the shoulder. "I'm telling you, since Desmond took over the operations side, Whitfield's finally started acting like a real company. Vivian's sharp, nobody saying otherwise, but ports, contracts, customs negotiations, that's a different kind of work." I set my glass down carefully. "So in the years before Desmond joined management, Whitfield just ran itself, did it, Wesley?" The table went quiet. Wesley's smile stiffened. "Oh, come on, nobody's saying that, you're still the chair, who'd forget that?" Beside Constance, Desmond's sister Marigold had her phone up, filmed everything. Since I'd put her in charge of internal communications, the posts had been mostly Desmond. Desmond at the podium. Desmond shaking hands with the Port Authority. I showed up in the background signing paperwork, looking tired. She swept the camera across the table. "Desmond, look this way, I need this for the company page. People should see who's bringing Whitfield into its next chapter." The camera lingered on him and slid past me like I was part of the centerpiece. "The company page," I said. "Or the family album." She blinked. "Don't be difficult tonight, Vivienne. I'm just having fun with it." I didn't push it. Not because I'd lost the point, but because as I was starting to notice how all the small pieces fit together. Near the side door, Desmond's cousin Bram hadn't touched his plate. Desmond had brought him in to run building security 8 months ago. Since then, the camera outside my office had gone down for maintenance twice. And twice my calendar had somehow lost the standing meeting I kept with Ruben, my father's old business partner, and the closest thing I had left to family who actually knew me. That night I understood the quietest man in the room was the one standing nearest the exit. Bram was on his phone, eyes flicking toward our table. I couldn't tell if he was looking at me or at the glass in my hand. Desmond set a piece of salmon on my plate, gentle, attentive. "Eat something, love. You've been running yourself into the ground for months. Let me handle the company tonight. Just enjoy it." I looked at him, the man who'd held my hand at my father's funeral and told me, "You don't have to carry this by yourself anymore, you have me now." Because of that sentence, I'd let him onto the executive team. I'd given Wesley a department. I'd let Marigold run communications and Bram touch the security system. I thought trusting my husband's family was simply the right thing to do. The Canadian thing, the decent thing. You make room at the table. That night, surrounded by the smell of dill and butter and citrus, I felt for the first time like a guest in the company my father had spent 30 years building. Just as I brought my glass to my lips, a server came past with a tray of side plates. His name tag read Caleb Whitlow. Whether he tripped or simply misjudged the space, the full pitcher he was carrying tipped and a wave of ice water went straight down the front of my dress. The cold hit me like a slap and I jolted upright. Constance slammed her hand on the table. "Is this a banquet hall or a truck stop? My daughter-in-law is wearing a $4,000 gown." Wesley scowled. "Somebody get the manager. This is supposed to be a celebration, not a circus." Marigold lowered her phone. Bram turned from the door. And Desmond was on his feet faster than any of them. But it wasn't the water that put a chill straight through me. Desmond wasn't looking at my soaked dress. He wasn't looking at the server. He was staring at the glass of sparkling water, still sitting by my plate, inches from where my hand had been a second earlier. For half a second, his eyes weren't warm at all. They were sharp, calculating, and gone again before anyone else could have seen it. The young server kept apologizing, bowing slightly, the way you do when you're 22 and terrified of losing a job that pays your rent. I am so sorry, ma'am. I'm so sorry, everyone. Let me take you to get this cleaned up right away. The hotel will cover any damage to the dress. Constance was still fuming. Go on then, don't just stand there. Desmond stepped forward to take my arm. I'll come with you. I looked at him, and then at the glass on the table, and something in me pulled back on its own. It's fine. Stay, host your guests. I'll be right back. For just a moment, something flickering behind his eyes before the smile came back. Marigold forced a smile of her own. Hurry back, Vivienne. I still need the family toast shot. I didn't answer. I followed Caleb out of the ballroom. Behind me, the chatter started up again, but it didn't sound the same anymore. The hallway carpet swallowed our footsteps, the wall sconces throwing long, uneven shadows ahead of us. Some accidents look clean at first. The worst ones are the ones that happen exactly when they need to. Once we were clear of the ballroom doors, Caleb's pace changed completely. The flustered, apologetic kid was gone. He leaned in close, his voice low and shaking. Mrs. Whitfield Croft, listen to me. Don't go back to that table. I stopped dead in the corridor, one hand pressed against the cold, wet silk at my stomach. Faint music leaked through the closed ballroom doors behind us, but his words landed harder than the water had. What did you say? His face had gone pale, hands trembling so badly the cloth he was holding shook with them, but his eyes didn't waver from mine. Don't go back in there. Say you're feeling sick. Find a reason to leave the building right now. Your husband has this arranged. I studied him. He couldn't have been older than 22, 23. But there was something in his face that night I couldn't write off as nerves. Do you know who I am? I said quietly. Yes, ma'am. You're Vivienne Whitfield, chair of Whitfield Logistics. But that's not why I'm telling you this. I'm telling you because if you walk back through those doors, I don't think you walk out of this building the same way you walked in. My heart was going hard enough I could feel it in my throat. He pulled me a few steps further, into the alcove by the washrooms where a tall arrangement of white lilies blocked us from the hallway. I don't have much time, he said. You need to hear this. He took a phone from his apron pocket and played an audio clip, the volume so low I had to lean in to catch it. First just the clatter of a service cart, glasses, someone's footsteps. Then a man's voice cut through, a voice I'd known for 11 years, at dinner tables, at my father's funeral, in every promise that all he wanted was for me to finally rest. Desmond's voice. Make sure it's done quietly tonight. Once she's had the drink, get her out through the side entrance before anyone notices. The floor seemed to tilt under me. Where did you get this? Caleb's hand was shaking around the phone. I cleaned the service hallway by the kitchen. He's been on calls back there for 2 weeks. Careful, but not careful enough. Tonight I recognized your name. I knew if I didn't do something, I'd be the only one who knew, and I'd have to live with that. What's in the glass? I said. I don't know exactly. I heard him on the phone with someone called Priya, twice, talking about dosage, about how it shouldn't show on a standard test. I'm not a doctor. I just know I wasn't going to let you drink it. I thought of every dinner where Desmond had refilled my water himself, attentive, doting, the husband everyone said I was lucky to have. I thought of how easily I'd let him take pieces of the company off my plate the same way he'd just put salmon on it. Caring, generous, until I looked up and realized how much was gone. Why are you telling me this? I asked. You could lose your job. Worse. He looked down the hallway toward the ballroom, then back at me. My mom raised me on her own. She always said the worst thing a person can do is know something is wrong and stand there holding a tray, pretending they didn't see it. I'd rather lose this job than be that person. I didn't go back to the ballroom. I told the maitre I'd taken ill, asked him to have my coat brought to the side entrance, and I left through the kitchen corridor with Caleb walking 2 steps ahead of me, like he was simply escorting a guest to her car. In the parking garage I called Ruben, not Desmond, and I sat in my car with the engine off until he picked up. Vivienne, he said. What's wrong? I need you to meet me tonight, and I need you to bring someone from forensics, not company forensics, someone independent. By the time I got home, alone to the house, not the condo Desmond and I shared downtown, I had already decided I wasn't going to confront anyone yet. My father used to say that the worst thing you can do to a person setting a trap is let them know you've seen it, you let them keep building it. You watch where the wood goes. The next morning I didn't mention the audio. I told Desmond I'd come down with a stomach bug from the seafood, that I'd gone to bed early. He brought me ginger tea and sat on the edge of the bed stroking my hair, and I let him, even as every part of me wanted to pull away. I needed him relaxed. I needed Constance and Wesley and Marigold relaxed. I needed Bram to believe the cameras outside my office were still down for maintenance, because for the first time that worked in my favor. I spent the next 3 weeks doing exactly what I'd always done. chairing meetings, reviewing the Halifax contract, smiling for Marigold's photos, while quietly, carefully, pulling threads. Ruben's forensic contact got into the building's old security backups, the ones from before Bram took over, archived on a server nobody but my father's original IT consultant still had access to. There were 6 months of footage showing Bram disabling the camera outside my office, on a rotating schedule that matched, almost exactly, 6 dates when large transfers moved out of a Whitfield subsidiary account into something called Larkhall Holdings. I had our family lawyer, a woman named Odette who'd worked for my father since before I could walk, quietly pull the incorporation papers on Larkhall Holdings. It took her 4 days to come back to me with a name on the ownership documents I genuinely did not expect. Constance, not Desmond. His mother. Larkhall Holdings had been set up 19 months ago. 1 month before my father died. Before any of us knew his heart was failing. Constance had been positioning Desmond as the face of the takeover, but she was the one holding the actual shares, drawing them down slowly, deal by deal, contract by contract. With Wesley's procurement department feeding falsified invoices straight into it, and Marigold's communications quietly building a public record that made it look, on paper, like Desmond had been running the company for years. The marriage, the funeral, the comforting hand on mine, all of it had been the slow, patient work of 3 years. The audio Caleb had given me wasn't about money, not directly. It was about removing me before the next board vote. The one that would finalize the Halifax contract under my signature and trigger a clause my father had built into the company's founding charter. One Odette confirmed for me. One nobody but family was supposed to know about. If I died or was declared incapacitated before that vote, controlling interest in Whitfield didn't pass to my husband. It passed into a trust that none of the Croft family could touch, administered by Ruben until any child I had reached 25. They hadn't been trying to take the company from me through a courtroom or a boardroom fight. They'd been trying to remove me entirely, fast, before the vote, while the trust clause was still buried in paperwork. Nobody outside the family lawyer's office had read in a decade. I requested an emergency board session for the Friday before the Halifax vote, telling everyone it was a routine governance review. Constance arrived in lavender, satisfied. Already half certain the company was hers in everything but name. Desmond sat beside me, his hand resting on my knee under the table like he always did. The same gesture that used to feel like comfort, and now felt like a hand checking whether I'd moved. I had Odette present first. Quietly, calmly, the way she'd been trained to deliver bad news to people who didn't yet know it was coming. The Larkhall documents, the falsified invoices, the security gaps that matched the transfer dates exactly. Then the audio, the full version Ruben's team had cleaned up and authenticated, Desmond's voice filling the boardroom in a quiet that had real weight to it. Constance didn't deny it. That surprised me more than anything else that day. She looked at me across the table, not afraid, almost proud of herself. "Your father built something extraordinary," she said, "and you were never going to be able to hold it together on your own. Someone had to be ready to catch it." "I wasn't faulting," I said. "You were the one pushing." Desmond didn't speak at all. He sat very still, the hand that had been on my knee now flat on the table, and for the first time in 11 years I watched him understand that the version of himself he'd shown me, attentive, devoted, a little overwhelmed by how much he loved me, had finally run out of room to perform. The board voted unanimously to remove him from his position that afternoon. The Halifax contract was finalized under my signature alone 3 days later. The criminal referral against Constance, Wesley, and Bram went to the Ontario Securities Commission and the RCMP's Commercial Crime Unit within the month, and the divorce filing went in the same week. Citation simple. The kind lawyers write when they already have everything they need and don't need to embellish it. People asked me afterward gently, the way Canadians ask things, careful not to pry too hard, whether I regretted trusting him in the first place. I didn't, not exactly. I regretted not trusting myself sooner. The version of me that noticed his eyes on the glass instead of on my dress, and almost talked herself out of what she'd seen. I found Caleb a few months later, not through the restaurant. He'd quietly left that job the week after the gala, frightened, certain Bram had clocked his face. I tracked him down through payroll records with Odette's help, and set up a scholarship in my father's name at George Brown College, not earmarked for him specifically. Open application. Transcripts and references like anyone else. Because I didn't want him to spend the rest of his life being the waiter who saved the chairwoman. I wanted him to be able to build something that was entirely his own. He applied. He got in on his own marks. 2 years later, he finished his diploma in supply chain management and came to my office in a new blazer that still had the fold creases in it, holding a small bunch of grocery store carnations because he said he didn't know what else you brought to something like this. I just wanted you to know I graduated, he said. And that my mom's doing okay. Thank you. I looked at this young man who'd deliberately tipped a pitcher of water over a stranger because his conscience wouldn't let him do otherwise, and I thought about how strange it is, the way some people sit across from you at a table and call you wife, daughter, sister, while quietly waiting for you to fall, and someone else stands at the edge of the room with a tray in his hands and decides on his own, with nothing to gain, to reach out instead. You're thanking the wrong person, I told him. I'm the one who owes you. He shook his head, embarrassed. I just did what felt right. A lot of people know what's right, Caleb. Almost nobody's willing to do it when it costs them something. When he was ready, I told him Whitfield had an internal audit and compliance department, and if he wanted to apply, he should send his resume in like anyone else. No favors, no shortcut. Whether he got the job would come down to his interview and nothing else. He applied. He got it on merit, junior compliance analyst, no reserved seat waiting for him. The day he signed his contract, his hand shook the same way it had in that hallway with the lilies. The most important thing in this job, I told him, isn't your transcript. It's having the nerve to stop something wrong, whether the person doing it is wearing a uniform or sitting at the head of the boardroom table. He nodded like he meant to remember it for a long time. That evening I drove out to my father's old house on the escarpment, the one I'd kept exactly as he left it, down to the chess set frozen mid-game on the side table. I went into his study and poured 2 glasses of the rye he used to keep for Friday nights, set one on his desk beside the Halifax contract, and a photo of the two of us at the company's 20th anniversary, and stood in front of the portrait of him, over the fireplace the way I used to when I came home with a report card. It's not exactly how you'd have done it, Dad, I said, but I held it. I thought about that gala more than I expected to in the months that followed. The smell of dill and citrus, the cold shock of water down the front of my dress, the way Desmond's eyes had gone to the wrong thing at the wrong moment and given himself away without saying a word. I thought about Constance at the head of the table, insisting a company that size needed a man's hand, about Wesley calling 30 years of my father's work a thing that just happened on its own, about Marigold's camera sliding past me like furniture, about Bram standing by the exit like a lock someone had already turned. I used to think that dinner was a celebration. It turns out some banquets aren't held to mark a win. They're held to walk you quietly out of your own life while everyone claps. People still ask me, sometimes if I hate him. I've thought about it honestly. More than once. There was anger in there, and grief, real grief, for the marriage I thought I had. But holding on to hate would only have meant letting him keep a hand on my life in a different shape. I chose to remember enough not to be foolish about it again, and let go of enough to actually live. I don't resent being a wife, or being patient, or making room for someone else's family at my table. There's nothing wrong with any of that. But when those things are used to talk a woman into handing over what her own father spent his life building, into smiling through her own erasure and calling it grace, that isn't a marriage anymore. That's just a cage with better lighting.